now, and people who have come late to the meeting, well, that's just too bad. So thank you all for being here. I am Sarah Grillo, and it's me, Sarah G, with this back, and I am back. And today we're going to be talking about various topics in financial planning and tax planning. Welcome to our Transparent Advisor Meetup. I've got the ability to use Zoom captioning enabled on this webinar. This is an inclusive environment. I want nobody to feel excluded in any way. And I've said this before that, I have met many of you, but many of you not. And I just want you to know that regardless of your familiarity with this group, or if you're with us on social media or know me or know other people or whatever, everyone's welcome. Everyone's ideas are welcome. And this is also, I want to be very clear, not a meetup for any specific type of advisor. We do focus on certain fee models that are maybe newer and that do offer transparency more inherently than others. In my view, however, that is only my view. And, I'm humble in the sense that, I say a lot of stuff, and I know that everybody has their own perspective on things, and I'm always welcome to learn about how my perspective can be improved by listening to them. So that's my long way of saying everybody's welcome, and this is inclusive. So if you'd like to enable captioning, the instructions are here. Also, there's another meetup in January. We have a meetup on the second Wednesday of the month at 1 p.m. And I just put it into the chat. The link is in the chat. So if you'd like to sign up for that, please do. The other announcement is that we have a discussion event on or pod day every day, the day after our monthly meetup. So basically, I covered this in our October meetup. But there's a strategy that you can utilize on LinkedIn regarding initial engagement. So just to review really quickly, your goal should be to get as many engagements within the first hour after you post something on LinkedIn. We call this the golden hour. And so what we've done is we've orchestrated a group that will collectively comment on each other's posts, all of them commenting on everybody else's post within 1 hour of the posting. And we do this once a month. So it's always the day after the meetup. And so tomorrow we're going to be having a pod event at 1 p.m. Eastern. If you're already a member, then please note in your calendar to post into the thread at that time. If you're not a member of the pod group, the Transparent Advisor pod group, let me know. Again, this is free. Everything regarding this group is free at the moment. The other thing is I am having a free workshop for an hour and a half on Monday, the 19th. And the reason I'm doing this is to further the movement. I know that sales and marketing is often viewed as the area needing the most improvement amongst people that I have surveyed in our LinkedIn group. Now, does that represent the needs of the entire group? Maybe yes or maybe no. I'd love to hear from people as to what your needs are, because I can then tailor the content of our discussions to address those needs. But so far, the biggest need that I personally have heard is sales and marketing. That happens to be my specialty. So I'm having an hour and a half workshop. We're going to be covering how to make an awesome email newsletter, how to design your website for SEO optimization so that you can attract leads in, and how to use LinkedIn effectively as a prospecting tool. It's a free workshop. I have a few spots left, so please let me know if you're interested in this. And so it's Monday the 19th. And lastly, one of the things that I was thinking of in terms of how to further the overall movement was I was thinking of starting a transparency focused publication. As you know, there are news publications, investment news, Wealth Management Magazine, Financial Planning Magazine. So what I'm looking to do is start an online newspaper that is entirely dedicated to the topic of transparency in its various forms. And the reason I'm mentioning this is that anyone that has anything to say about transparency and how to improve it would be welcome to contribute as a guest blogger. So if this is something you're interested in, if you think it's a good idea, then let me know. I certainly am not as well versed in many of these topics as a financial advisor or other specialists. And so it really would be very helpful if people from the movement were to get involved with this online publication that I might be starting, may or may not be. I'm looking into it, but I'm just gauging now what would be the interest in participating with that. And lastly, I started an Instagram page that is entirely dedicated to the transparency movement. It's Transparent Advisor Movement on Instagram. And the reason is that I post on my social media about a lot of different topics, but I'm really opinionated. And sometimes I say things that, like aren't necessarily related to transparency. And if you want to just get the transparency related news related to best practices to increase transparency related to our group or related to the transparency movement in general, and in terms of what other people are doing, then please follow on Instagram. And we also have a LinkedIn group that is a little bit more interactive where people can meet and talk to each other. So that's all I have to say for now. I think I've been talking a little bit too much. Oh yeah, these are some transparency resources as well. And just take them down or ask me for the resources after this webinar. And I'm going to stop talking now because I'm tired of talking. And we're going to welcome Professor Glenn Frank. Professor, I'm giving you the spotlights. Please go ahead and get started. So what is financial planning, Professor?
Give me a second here, Sarah.
Okay, you bet. I'll just keep talking. So everybody, the topic of today's meetup will be financial planning and also tax planning. What would be really helpful is if you could chat in any of the specific questions that you have on this topic. And Professor Frank has been so gracious as to volunteer his time. He's a financial planning specialist and I believe director of financial planning at his company and professor, I believe at in an academic institution on this topic. So are you ready?
Yeah, so what are you seeing now, Sarah?
I'm not seeing the entire slide.
All right. I'm a low-tech kind of guy. Sorry. Let's see here.
Just click on presenter view up in the upper left.
Upper left.
It's the third one in. When you see the little icons.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm not seeing that.
Right under draw. Home insert draw. Right below it.
Like right here where my pointer is. See that?
Oh, okay. Well, let me start chatting while I fumble here a little bit. So, okay. In any case, wow, 10 minutes is pretty tough for me. No jokes, no quotes, no anecdotes here. So we're going to work with the 10 minutes, and I know Dwight's going to struggle with that as well. I tend to blather on here. So let me. So we got how do we bring transparency, clarity to the financial planning process? And I'd like to get to my slides, but so you can at least see that slide. 6 steps of happiness,
yes, we can see it.
If you will. Yep. All right, good. Let me work with that. You want to be a superior planner? How can you add value in excess of your actual cost? Do you want an avocation or just a regular job? If you want clarity for your clients, the bottom line is they want to be happier. And it's not just about numbers. The very best planners already instinctively bring happiness into the financial planning equation. I'm going to go a little further. I'm going to actually add some structure. So planning is a much more deliberate happiness planning. Kind of almost a left brain engineer's approach towards happiness. So let's talk about general plans. There is no universal best plan. I will say it should be in writing. It should be in whatever level of detail is appropriate for your clients. Let's start with a 6-step financial planning process by the Denver CFP. So I think people are probably pretty familiar with it. I've highlighted a couple of things where I think you can take it to a higher level. If you want your clients to be happier, you have to bring some other pieces into the equation beyond money. You need to bring time into it and happiness itself. So I've got a shortcut that we're going to get to in a little bit. I call it the time, money, joy matrix. You'll have the term matrix. In any case, we're going to get to that in a little bit. Here's my hypothesis. Most decisions are really a trade-off between time, money, and happiness. But most people are kind of doing this on the fly. It's kind of an implicit thing. What I'm suggesting, if you want better decisions, you'll make it an explicit thing, explicitly factoring in this balancing act we all have between time, money, and happiness. I'm going to get that in a little bit. Your job is simply A to B. You figure out where your clients are today, point A, and where are they trying to get to? What in fact is point B? That's your job. Get them there. Metaphor today, we used to use the stagecoach driver kind of thing. I guess that's a little antiquated. Today, it's GPS. Basically, just like GPS, they dial in their destination with you, where they want to go. And if along the way there's traffic, an accident, and you change course for them, maybe they add a new stop. But bottom line is you should be their GPS. Again, trying to get them from point A to point B. And they should keep you plugged in. Hopefully this isn't just a one-shot deal. Let me see if I can actually navigate some slides here.
Professor, I actually took the slide. I'm in charge of the slide deck here. Okay, so this is actually from my screen.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I need people in my life to take control. Absolutely, Sarah. Okay. You still there? Anyway. So we have this whole issue of what's your role and what actually needs to be done for your clients. As you can see, there's tons going on here. Everything is interrelated. You really can't give piecemeal advice. You can't give advice in one area without thinking about all the other areas. Everything needs to be in context. Some basic questions. Are your clients capable of this overall coordination effort? Can they speak the language of all the other advisors? And who is ultimately responsible for everything? I highlighted two areas. Retirement projections, which will be your responsibility. I also highlighted investments, which may be your ongoing responsibility. You are usually just the advisor in all the other areas, as their GPS. Bottom line, clients need someone who knows them, that they can trust. They need a coordinator. They need an interpreter. They need someone to hold them accountable. And most importantly, they need the 3 C's: genuine concern, conviction, and especially calm in times like now, crazy markets. Note that Main Street has to be very careful who to let in that circle of trust. There are far too many wolves on Wall Street. Basically, they need you. Let's go to the next slide, Sarah. Thank you. So you got this thing, what's your number? So again, your responsibility will be the retirement calculations. I think clients should know their number, which is how much they should save and invest, where they get to this epiphany, this financial mountain they've climbed, where work becomes optional. Note that when it comes to investing, clients really should replace FOMO, fear of missing out, with FORO, fear of running out, outliving their money. That is huge, FORO. I just made that up. Regarding the financial plan, some subtleties I'd like to highlight. First and foremost, I think you should augment your Monte Carlo simulations with an actual dollar amount, like this work optional number. Basically, as long as your portfolio stays above $2.6 million, you're good. Clients can relate to a specific dollar amount a lot better than some 73% success rate. I think you want to do them both. Other points. Look under the Monte Carlo hood. What are the underlying assumptions? Are they reasonable? Another point I see over and over again. If you have too many conservative assumptions, you've got an unrealistic plan. So I see a lot of planners, every assumption is conservative, conservative, conservative. So if there's too many, it's actually not a realistic plan anymore. 2 more points. Retirement expenses. I love to see it in 3 stages. The go-go years, the slow-go years, and the no-go years. I think a lot of people do forecasts as though the go-go years will actually last until their 90s. Doesn't usually happen. The 5th and final point on doing these retirement calculations. Remember the story of the guy who was 6 feet tall, who drowned, crossing a river that was 5 feet on average in depth. What's my point? Your clients have to survive at the deep end. Kind of what could go wrong. So when you're doing the Monte Carlo, there's typically an option to plug in, gee, what if the first 2 years are a bear market? Again, I think that's a smart thing to do. The other role you might have, Sarah, if you could go to the next slide.
Yes.
So what's your role in the 5-step investment process? This is really tough for me. Covering investments in 5 minutes, usually take classes that go on for ad nauseum. So I came up with this 5-step investment process in the mid-90s. Hopefully all my students and all my colleagues are still using it. I like to think it's a very orderly process. The first step, they really need you. It's planning. Clients should have a targeted real rate of return that'll get on to point B. That's crucial. Targeted real rate of return. Regarding risk assessment, probably the very best way to assess their risk tolerance is to see how they've actually reacted in down markets like this year, like March of 2020. How do they navigate that? What's the real risk tolerance? Step 2, and this is all very sequential, asset allocation. If their targeted real rate of return is 1%, they only need to beat inflation by 1%, well, they can get pretty conservative. They may not want to, but they can. If they need to beat inflation by 6%, wow, they better be comfortable with a heavy equity portfolio, or maybe they should rethink their goals.
Professor, I'm just giving you the 2-minute warning.
Okay, all right,
Okay.
I'm going to speed it up. Pick your asset classes, put them in the right place. I think Dwight's going to talk about that, asset location. And step 3, don't spend all your time in step 3. It's not time well spent. In fact, so whether you're along the ride for every step of the way or not, I'm not sure. But let's, since we're cutting out of time, let's talk about the time, money, and joy matrix. That's new and that's novel. That's the next slide, Sarah. Thank you. Okay. Everything in your life is either must do or it's your choice, correct? So you can put everything in your life into one of these 6 squares. And it really allows people a chance to kind of reflect on what makes them happy and what doesn't. So let me explain a little bit more. Everyone's doing this juggle between time, money, and happiness. And this is my idea of a shortcut. For example, right now, today, and you, where does today's meeting fit on this matrix? For Sarah, pretty sure it's must do. For Sarah, I suspect it's upper left-hand green smiley face. What about you? This is your choice. You're going to spend an hour or so here. From a money perspective, you're not going to be billing anything. You're not being charged anything. Maybe you're going to have some new practice niche. It's going to get even better. I don't know.
30-second warning, Professor Frank.
Okay. What about happiness? There are 4 P's associated with happiness in my experience. Pride, pleasure, purpose, and progress. My suspicion is you being here today, I'm not sure about pleasure, but my suspicion is you will find you're making progress. I think your whole avocation here is real purpose. And I suspect you take pride in your work. So I think all things considered, you made a very wise decision to be here. If you want to go much deeper into this, how you might actually integrate this into a practice, this could be take-home work for your clients. If you want to get deep into it, you can go to my website, Time, Money, and Joy. I'm not selling anything. And you can find detailed spreadsheets and explanation. Bottom line is, I think this is a shortcut for your clients to make better decisions. They'll be more informed. You'll get credit for it, and everyone will be happier. But of course, you should try this yourself first. How do you
Okay.
see-
And sorry, going to end the presentation now. We thank you so much, Professor Frank. And we actually have had quite a few questions coming in on the chat for you, Professor. So from
Okay.
Kelly Birnbaum, where do you get your, what do you recommend for inflation assumptions? Professor.
Yeah, good question. I guess I have no economist here. Good luck to the Feds getting it down to 2. I think it's 3, 3.5, 4. Are we talking short term, long term? I'm not sure. Yeah, something higher than their targets and something lower than it is now from everything I read in here.
Okay, maybe we could just open it up to the group. If anybody has opinions about this or could provide advice, this is the great thing about structuring this as a meetup is that, I mean, I always say this, that we're here to help each other. So if you have something to offer, Kelly Birnbaum, on this topic and also to our group, please chat it in or go ahead and unmute yourself and give us a holler. Another question is, I'd love to hear from Professor how he delineates the line between tax mitigation work in financial planning as compared to that reserved for the CPA.
Oh, yeah, that's a great question. I've spent a ton of time. I was CPA, used to probably review 500 returns a year. So I'm a deep tax guy too. In any case, huge value add opportunity, but the tax tail obviously should not wag the dog. In terms of working with the CPAs, very collaborative. They do all the calculations, forecasts, second opinion kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, you don't want the liability associated with going out on a tax limb, if you will. So that's why we always kind of push it off on Dwight here, I guess. But it's a huge area to add value. And I'm not sure what clients hate more, paying taxes or understanding them. So if you understand them, they don't have to pay as much, you are an absolute hero.
Thank you, Professor. Okay, and so the chat is definitely exploding here with a lot of inputs to this question of inflation. Chris Randall, 3.5%. Michael Cortinaros could use the implied rate from tips versus standard treasuries. 100-year average is 3.1. Someone's saying 3.5 with a 1 plus or minus. Inflation depends. College versus Medicare versus Social Security. Inflation lies within your spending. Someone else is saying 2.5% over the long, emphasis on the word long, term course of a 30-year retirement. 2.5% over the, now someone else is saying 2.5% over the long, emphasis on the word long, term course of a 30-year retirement. Long-term care assumptions 5% in the UK. Also, expenses fall with age on average in retirement. Go, slow, go, no go. Wonderful. Okay.
I might comment, Sarah, that a couple of things. Number one, the housing is a huge part of it. And if you know how they do the calculations, it's a little distorted in that they talk to owner's equivalent rent and they ask people, what do you think your house would rent for? And I don't think they really factor in how much your home has gone up in value, although it's dropped a little bit since. And I think what's really relevant for clients isn't general inflation, but their inflation.
Their
So
inflation, their personal experience of inflation.
Or what it's likely to be, what areas in their life are likely to change. If their housing is set, they don't have to worry about their rent going up, that kind of thing. Yeah, so I think you need to be a little more precise and kind of look at what their lifestyle is, what their expenditures are, and what's going to get hit with inflation more than something else.
Okay, so here's where we have another speaker lined up, Dwight Detloff. But first, what I'm going to do is, before we move on from this section of the presentation, I'm going to sit and stare at all of you until somebody asks another question, just to make sure that we got all of the questions addressed that everybody has, because this is a community, we help each other, and that's all I'm going to say. So now I'm going to shut up and stare at all of you until someone asks a question. Yes, I am psycho. You don't even live with me. This is how I act with my family. I'm this psycho. That's right.
My question is, do I need to ask a question if I already typed a question, or
I
am I
already
off the
asked you a
hook?
question, Mr. Miller.
Thank you. Thank you for that too.
No one has any questions about financial planning. Y'all are financial planning experts.
Oh, hold on. I was giving some space. All right, if you can hear me okay. I may have missed it in the beginning if you said this, Professor, but I saw a wide swatch of very insightful stuff that you're saying that you analyze and then communicate with a prospect, for example. How long would you say the process would be for front end meeting the person to back end having this plan with what you just described to us?
I mean, I can certainly comment. I swear, half the initial meetings get rescheduled, it seems, and so you're really at their mercy. And it's whether there's something urgent, they have to make an immediate decision or not. It's one of those things in life that people procrastinate in. They know they should do financial planning, but they don't get around to it. So I don't have a really good answer. I think I don't want you to create a false sense of urgency to get them in the door, but you know, invariably, you know, they need to be pushed a bit. So
Yeah, let's talk about okay, let's talk about that, please. What insights does everybody else on this meetup, and there's 63 of y'all, does anybody have any good tips or advice about how to create more urgency in the financial planning process? Or does anybody have an answer to the original question, which was how long does it take to complete a financial planning cycle? Either one.
Yeah, and part of that second question there was curiosity with everything that you were describing. I was curious as if you had a, feel of a timeline, but yeah, go ahead.
Well, the approach I've always taken is really one more around, I don't really believe in a necessarily a financial planning cycle. I think it's financial planning as opposed to a financial plan. So it's a continual conversation. That's my approach.
But I would presume that initially there's a lot more financial planning work that needs to be done when you're taking on a new client. And I think that was the nature of the question, no? Okay. Does anyone have an answer for that? I see people chatting in. Why are you so shy?
I'll weigh in on.
No one wants to talk? That's what I could read the question. I could read it, but.
Sarah, can you hear me?
Yes, who is it?
Tim, you're right. So to your question around how to create the urgency, which I think ties to the likelihood that clients come in for a discovery meeting or continue from that and provide you the information you need to do the financial plan. What we have found and what I found in my experience there is, and I think the professor was touching upon this, but it's worth expanding on. An introductory call or discovery meeting is to bring the reality of the numbers behind sort of the concepts of, by waiting or delaying or procrastinating, which clients tend to want to do, we're much as behavioral finance people as we are financial experts, is we're psychologists, we have to nudge a little bit, is to help them see the repercussions of the outcomes of delaying. And that needs to be tangible in real numbers. So if I'm overpaying in taxes or I'm paying too much in fees on my outside accounts, bring a realness to that, because our industry is so opaque and has a lot of jargon. We need to eliminate that. And the more that we can create urgency around a realness that they see that affects them personally. So we have to get some understanding of what that is, draw those thin parallels there. You'll find, I think, people are more willing to go through the financial planning process. Now that we can work virtually and what have you, I feel like there's a little bit easier there, but meeting a financial planner takes time for the client end. So we have to make that easy for them. But if there's no urgency around what their delay or not changing is, then that's when I think you're going to see that fall off in the early stages of the relationship.
Okay, and so the chat is exploding here with people weighing in on this question. But my question back to the group is this: is there a way that we could possibly use transparency to increase urgency in this process? What did people do when you sit down? What do you show the client when you sit down for that initial financial planning meeting in terms of, does anyone present a timeline or a schedule of this is where we're going to be in a month, this is 2 months, this is 3 months? Does giving them a vision for what the steps will be actually help to increase urgency? Or am I just making that up? And as you know, I'm not someone that does this for a living, but I am a transparency advocate, so I have to ask the question. Yes, Mr. Randall.
So this is Chris Randall. I work mostly with millennials and younger people, and I found that I need to approach them where they are. I do have a timeline that I lay out in the beginning, but if they are busy with things or if they have other things going on, the best way to connect with them and show urgency is to let them know that you understand that they're busy with work, they're busy with kids, and then they feel like, oh, this person understands me. I'm going to get them that paperwork that I promised them. And it helps them create the urgency themselves. Personally, I have not had very much success trying to instill urgency in them from my side.
Okay, so yeah, have we uncovered a little bit of an issue that a lot of you are having here? Let me see if I see people nodding. I don't know. I don't have my grid view on. I mean, it seems like it is. Okay, so maybe this is something we could talk about later. But for now, we're going to turn it over. Hi, everybody. I'm seeing all the people I know. Okay, so I'm going to actually turn it over now to Dwight Detloff. Hello, Dwight.
Hello.
And I have your slides here, okay? So don't worry, I'm going to get them up in a minute. Here we go.
Oh gosh, you made slides out of what I sent you? Oh boy. All right, here we go.
Or we could just not. Actually, you know what? Bad idea. Let's just have you talk. Go ahead. I don't need to freak you out.
So I can send it out later for you, but okay. So I don't really have any slides because Sarah asked me, hey, can you talk about tax planning? I'm like, sure. The problem is I think most of tax planning is financial planning. So it's like, just copy paste what Professor just said. So the point I'm really trying to make is like what is tax planning? And I think part of that definition is really going to be dependent on who you're serving. And that's going to probably be different from a more traditional retiree or somebody like Chris Randall, who you work with, who maybe has equity compensation that's younger, et cetera, versus somebody that's mid-career or owns a business. So it's kind of a lot of different, I think, definitions of that. But generally speaking, right, I'm just thinking it's more of a way to how do we reduce or optimize somebody's tax situation over their lifetime. Like that's kind of probably what is in the simplest form. And I think it was Benjamin that asked a question about the role of the tax pro. And I'm trying to say tax pro because I know my enrolled agent friends get upset at me when we use CPA when maybe you're not. So I'll just kind of give you some examples, right? So some things with like tax planning is very similar to financial planning. Are we doing this in a short-term manner, which might be, hey, we're at the end of the year right now. I know personally I'm doing a lot of meetings with, are your withholdings good? Have you taken your RMDs? Should we talk about wash sales? Like just things like that. And making sure that when you file your taxes in April, are you good to go? Or are we going to at least reduce any surprises and make sure we're taking advantage of any of the tax code things that are changing, bonus depreciation, just whatever might be particular to that particular person. I'm not going to talk about a bunch of business stuff that isn't going to matter to somebody that's retiree and vice versa, right? So again, who are you talking to? And then certainly like over a longer period of time. So those sometimes are things like Roth conversions, AMT planning, looking at tax rates. It's where our financial planning software helps, whether it's eMoney or Right Capital or whatever product you're using to kind of say, here's why we might suggest, doing different things. So part of that really just, like somebody said, like, what are you trying to accomplish? And and I can kind of go into some examples. Like one I hear a lot, especially from self-employed people, is like, should I elect S corporation, or should I do something that has a tax ramification? It kind of comes back to like, but what are you ultimately trying to accomplish? So I usually, we'll kind of go back to that of like, well, what's the plan, right? Some of these things can be just like simple or complex. So again, if you're coming from maybe more of a traditional, like either insurance or investment management side and trying to get more into the financial / tax planning side, like you don't have to get like a master's in tax or anything like Kits is, unless you really want to do that. So something simple might be just like help calculating somebody's withholdings, like I mentioned before, like wages, retirement distributions, social security distributions, RSU comps. Tools can really help with that. Like, years ago, we used to have to, in school, like learn how to do that stuff in pen and paper when I was in accounting school. Like, you don't have to do that anymore. Some of the more complex stuff that, again, you just need to know enough to be dangerous, of like structuring liquidation events for a business owner. How does that look? What type of business might they need to be in? Real estate is really heavy in tax. For anybody that works with real estate investors, like sometimes they don't even have financial planners, they just have tax and legal guys and gals. So usually, like when somebody's talking about like tax planning or whatever, I like to bring up like either Tia Crafts or somebody, where it's like, here's all the contribution limits to 401ks, HSAs, all of that is tagged back to the tax codes. My point is, most of you are doing tax planning in some fashion anyway. It's already integrated. So just kind of some more tangible examples of it, or like tax return review, like that's a big one. A lot of people are DIYing their own taxes, right? There's a lot of people that are working with tax pros that are just preparing a tax return and that's it. And so they kind of get this document and they're like, what the heck do I do with it? So using something like a Holista plan to like review that and just explain to them what happened, like that's a huge value add for a lot of people that just like literally have no clue what's going on in their 1040 or their business returns. IRA contribution maximization or optimization, Roth, traditional, backdoor. How many times has anybody had that conversation even this week? I mean, I just had that conversation with somebody yesterday, and like it's just not something they do. It's not even in their realm of, in their own like day-to-day stuff. So that's something that probably everybody on this call, we do all the time. That is a huge deal in being able to explain, like, here's why we're recommending this versus this, because here's where you are now and here's where we're projecting to be. It's tax planning. Tax loss harvesting, kind of a big one this year, right? Tax gain harvesting, if you've got it. Tax efficient and sensitive investing, especially if you're doing portfolio management. Wash sales is a big one. Trying to get people to not trigger wash sales, especially if they have equity comp. That's fun. Benefits optimization is still, I think, a lot of tax planning in terms of like HSA contributions, FSAs, dependent care, just kind of all those things that kind of go into it. Again, some of that's going to be dependent on if you are, who you're working with, right? RMDs is a big one. And then, we can get into like different gifting things, right? Like donor advised funds, trust, private foundations, family LLCs, LLPs, just generational gifting. Some of you probably do some of that now, and some of you are like, yeah, my clients aren't there, I don't deal anything with that, punt. But those are kind of fun things to think about. If you're working with business owners or self-employed folks, which is kind of happening more and more, and maybe that's my own self-selection bias, but just like understanding how sole proprietorship works, S corporation, C corporation, some of those different things, at least under the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act stuff, some of that like, tax planning of itemizing your deductions has kind of gone away for a lot of people, but there's still a lot of planning opportunities really on like the business side of that equation. Equity compensation, like I talked about. Real estate is like super heavy in tax. Real estate is very like ticky-tacky. So like knowing anything about real estate, if you're a financial planner, is going to be a huge head and shoulders over probably most other financial planners, and quite frankly, over a lot of accountants. And then the other piece with a lot of real estate is usually partnership rules. And I personally and others think that partnership taxation is probably the most complex area of the tax code. So if you know even just a little bit about how partnership taxation works and real estate taxation work, you could make a whole niche out of just that. And they tend to not be like huge AUM fans. So like if you're in like flat fee or hourly, or kind of can figure out a compensation model that works for that works out really well. Education planning, tax bracket management, which years are we in? Do we have any control over when we recognize tax? Liquidation events, whether you're retiring or having a business sell, real estate piece of property, sell, just kind of counseling people on that. So really it all kind of comes back into, hey, what are your goals? What are you trying to do here? And then how do we make the tax plan work into that? Because I agree with Professor Glenn. Like, even as an accountant myself, we don't want the tax tail wagging the dog. So there's plenty of things that I will recommend or suggest to people that may not be hearing on like tax TikTok or something like that.
2-minute warning, Dwight.
That's all see, it's so fast. So there was a couple questions that came in that Sarah had, like just kind of on different tools. I'll probably just put it up on my LinkedIn and you can go find it. There's a ton of different tools out there that are mostly geared for accountants and CPAs. I think Holistiplan is one of the better ones that are out there right now. I'm more of a BNA or Planner CS fan myself, but I think Holistiplan is a really great tool if you're just trying to get out there, to kind of use it. Somebody kind of asked, like, what are you supposed to deliver? I don't know if there's anything. Again, I think this is going to be a function of who you're working with and what you're doing. I think it's just a matter of providing sort of the tax ramifications of that. Hey, we're going to do a Roth. I suggest a Roth conversion. It's going to cost you X now, but here's how it might save you taxes over the long run. Right Capital shows that, things like that. So I guess I really usually use these times for like, what questions do you have and what's coming through the chat that I'm not really paying any attention to.
Awesome. Thank you, Dwight. That was awesome. Questions are coming in. Go ahead, Chris Randall.
Hey, Dwight.
What's up, Chris?
What are some of the major misconceptions that people have about taxes? The one I usually hear is, oh, I'll just put all my assets in a trust and I won't have to pay any tax on them. What are the things that the general population thinks is true that we can help educate people on?
Oh my gosh. All right. So, I mean, if you're not on Twitter, go on Twitter, look up the hashtag tax Twitter, and you will find a whole lot of salty tax professionals coming up with all the hot takes. Or go on tax, what's the hot one right now? Anyway, there's just a lot of bad ones. So the ones that I tend to see, and again, this is probably self-selection bias, is people kind of saying, hey, I'm going to start a business. So they automatically think that you started having an LLC, one, has anything to do with taxes. It doesn't. And two, that just because I have an LLC, I can run all my expenses through that and create a tax loss or have tax expenses. Again, you can't. So those are probably the two ones that I tend to see the most when I'm just doing like consults with folks. Trusts are probably the newer version of that now, of like, I'll just start a trust and I won't pay tax. Like, that's probably not true. So beefing up on probably a couple of those areas to dispel that. I mean, you'll get the question enough times that you can do your own research and just say, this just isn't true. Like, this isn't right. But those are probably the ones that I see the most. Trusts and LLCs. Hobbies are another big one. Like, oh, this is a business. Like, no, you're a cardiologist. Like, your photography business is not a business, it's a hobby, probably. Real estate's another one. It's just, there's a lot of misconceptions. Like, that's a whole thing. I'm sure we all deal with it from like the ROI of it or whatever, and just how the losses work or don't work, and just kind of some of the misconceptions with real estate. There's a lot out there. And S corporations is the other one that I get a lot of. Hey, my accountant said I should be an S corporation. You got to pay yourself reasonable compensation. So, you can't pay yourself zero. That is de facto not reasonable. So just kind of helping people know, you don't have to tell them what it is. You don't have to consult and say, this is what reasonable compensation is, but at least starting to ask some of those questions. So it's probably the big ones. Does that answer your question, Chris?
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, trusts, LLCs, S Corp, real estate. Those are probably and hobbies. Those are probably the 5 that I can talk about all day without needing to look anything up.
With respect to real estate in a market like California, it's very difficult to have like a large positive cash flow because the sticker prices are so high. How does real estate market like that impact the tax implications from depreciation or some of the other like major tax considerations on real estate?
Okay, so I'll try to be as quick as I can on this because I could spend hours on this. So really, I just try to talk to people about real estate, that it's an investment, right? You're taking a slug of cash probably from somewhere and you're investing it. And so, yeah, everybody would love to get passive income every month. But the reality is when you look at the pros that are really actually doing this stuff and like professionalized it, they're not making truckloads of cash flow on the outset unless they're doing other things in the back end of this. So if somebody's making $100, $200, $300 a month or something like that, that might be about as good as it's going to get. And if you're just a retail investor in the real estate market, the stuff you're seeing, like the pros have already probably passed up on a lot of that. So like just kind of being cognizant of it. And for most of the folks that we're probably working with, or at least that I'm working with, any losses that are coming through from that aren't going to be deductible anyway. So it just sits there and builds up until they decide to sell it later on, or they do other exchanges and things like that. So really it's more of a tax deferral mechanism, really more so than a real true tax play. Almost sort of like a non-deductible IRA kind of thing, right? Where it's like, you're not really getting a deduction for this thing going in, you're getting tax deferred growth for it, and you may or may not pay tax on this thing on the back end later. Oh, that's it. So,
Okay.
yeah,
Thank you. Okay.
real estate's
Heath Miller.
weird.
Heath Miller, do you want to unmute and talk for a minute, please? Heath Miller, are you there? I'm calling you.
I am. I'm here.
Okay. Can you please state your comment that you entered into the chat that I thought was a great comment? It is worth noting for folks that do not know the Secure Act, blah, blah, blah. Can you just talk for a minute on that, please?
Yeah, so the Secure Act was snuck into the budget bill in 2019 and largely had a delayed effective date to last year. Historically, to adopt a 401k plan, you had to do so by year end. That's no longer the case. You can actually adopt a plan up until your tax filing date. Now, there's some issues on 401k deferrals because technically those should be done by year end. After tax, I think you can do up until January 30th or thereabout, but profit sharing contributions can be done up until your tax filing date. So if you have a small business or even a 1099 independent person, there's solo 401k plans out there. I only know about this because we started 2 PEPs, one for solos and one for groups. They can adopt retroactively in some instances and then still fund. So you'll have, many of you are going to have clients who are going to come to you probably around April 14th complaining about all the taxes they're going to pay, and it's still possible to put them into a plan for 2022, even though it will be after the year. And that's just a weird nuance. It was a change in the law that many people aren't aware of.
Heath, how do financial advisors and planners find out about these weird nuances that can be helpful to their clients?
That's a good question. I mean, I'm a tax attorney, so it's kind of those weird things I follow.
But what do you follow?
I follow literally the bills or when things are passed.
That's
Anytime there's any
fine.
big
How do you find that
legislation.
information? Is it just that you follow like the IRS on Twitter? You get their
No,
email?
like literally whenever some big tax, if I see anything that mentions that anything tax related is coming out, or anytime there's a large bill. So like your defense spending, your year end debt limit, the jokers in Congress hide and throw all kinds of junk into that stuff. So that's how this stuff comes about. I'm also
up into an act and then
right. So, and I mean, the American Bar Association is probably a good place to look. You could look at the tax section. Ironically, in about 10 minutes, I'm supposed to get on a call. I may be on the PEP-MEP subcommittee for the ABA. So that's what the call's about. But that's a good source.
Kiplinger tax letter, says Professor Frank.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Kiplinger. Okay, is that free? How do people get that?
The guy at the office that sends it to me. I don't know how I actually get it.
Who sends it?
But it's an internal thing, so people are going to have to Google that.
Okay,
somebody in my office sends it to me.
So let's share those resources. This is important because I find that a lot of times there's not a lot of differentiation one to the next, and having advanced knowledge like this, sometimes that comes straight from the source, from the IRS, et cetera, can be helpful if you understand the tax code directly. Sometimes you have to just, okay, somebody says Andy Pulianda. If I pronounce your name wrong, Andy, I'm sorry. I subscribe to the Kiplinger tax letter too. Great resource. I pay about $150 a year for it. You can sign up for direct emails from the IRS. Right. Everybody sign up for, in fact, why don't I do that too? I'm going to do that after this is done. Okay, Danielle, are you here, Danielle? Do you want to weigh in on anything on this? Because Danielle is a tax expert. Thank you, Heath.
Meanwhile, taking my tax final. I'm just listening. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. if you had anything to say about that, I just want to encourage, because this is a meetup and this is a community. If you have anything you'd like to say, Sean Mullaney, are you there? Would you like to weigh in on this at all?
Yeah, hey, sure. I'm a financial planner in Los Angeles. I myself put out resources on this stuff. I've got a blog, fitaxguy.com, talks about sort of the intersection of tax and financial independence. I just published a book on the solo 401k. So, and the other thing I do, what I've been doing the last few days is literally go to Twitter and just search Secure 2.0, right? That's the bill that's kicking around right now in Congress. So just put it in the search window. You can put it in Google search just for the news. I myself am very much against Secure 2.0, but that's not the discussion topic for today. But you could just find like, okay, I mean, it looks like if it moves, it's probably going to be next week. That's the, so it's just like, hey, if there's some tax bill out there that's kicking around, I will say a lot of the sources are not going to be planning sources, right? I think that's where we get confused in the world here. It's not about knowing rules, it's about knowing planning, right? We don't have to know every last rule. Nobody knows every last rule. I would focus more on the planning things. And unfortunately, from a lot of the quote unquote official sources, you're not going to get the planning. Now, some of you will, right? Kitces.com, great blog. Jeffrey Levine does a lot of really good write-ups there. So if you're just looking for more planning stuff, Jeffrey Levine, right? You can follow CPA planner, you follow me on Twitter, those sorts of things. You might get some New York Jets football too if you follow me on Twitter. But so just a few thoughts.
I'd like to add one thing. I find that a lot of financial advisors say that the IRS tax notices, they're really nice and easy to understand, but they are not primary sources. So please be careful and try to learn from the actual tax code rather than those notices.
Danielle, are you saying that people should attempt to learn from the actual tax code as opposed to those notices?
Yes.
I'd agree. Always go to the source. Start broad and get an understanding and then go dig in.
Yeah, okay, forgive me.
There's traps everywhere.
Okay, so to avoid the traps, how would someone find the original tax code?
26 USC. So anytime you see a code section, if you just type in 26 USC in that code section in Google, it'll probably bring you to I think it's Cornell, or there's a couple of places that actually have the direct statutory provisions. And the only reason I say that is, I'll give you an example. In the 401k retirement space, people go, oh, I'm the employer. They don't realize the employer by definition under the tax code includes an entity, all the entities that own 80% or more or are owned 80% or more. In a private setting, 5 or fewer individuals that have a particular ownership. So you can end up thinking that you have a plan that passes muster and you've got a sister company or a parent sub that's not participating, and you just blew the whole thing up. And nobody would intuitively realize that that's what the term employer means. When I say there's traps like that, I think one of the best things that groups on this call that are not CPAs could do, and I'm not a CPA, it's not what I do, but partner with one, because I think it's a great opportunity to exchange thoughts and better serve a client. If you're in the investment space and don't do a lot of that financial planning, and if you're a CPA and you do the tax stuff but don't do the investment side, it's a great opportunity to work together. It's just from my experience.
Question on the chat, and then we're going to get to a legal update from Knut. I think the whole point as planners is to probably not know the tax code, but know enough of when to ask the experts for more help. Curious what others think. From Matt Pruitt. Matt, thanks for being here.
I think there needs to be a mixture of both. So a mixture of seeking resources and having a list of resources you can go for help, and educating yourself as well. It could be as simple as, I'm going to research IRC 165, and you spend one day per week researching one code a week, and then going from 165 to the regulations, and then reading some court cases. It doesn't have to be really difficult.
Thank you, Danielle. That's great. Wonderful to hear from you. And so here we have heard from both of the featured speakers for today's meetup. But before we get to the legal section of the meetup, I'd like to just pause and stare at all of you through Zoom because I want to know if anyone has any questions, and I'm going to stop talking until somebody asks a question.
Sarah, can I ask a question?
You sure can.
Thank you. I'm going back to something that Chris said several minutes ago regarding the issue of getting clients to react, to stay on schedule, whatnot. The question that is raised indirectly from a legal point of view vis-a-vis the states is, I'm just curious, how often, and I suspect I can guess at an answer, how often either in a project engagement of 3 to 6 months or an annual ongoing engagement, do you get behind schedule because clients have lives to live and don't have emergencies yet in their view? And so because the point here is, one of the issues that comes to a fore is the issue of invoicing and receiving payment vis-a-vis services rendered. So it does become relevant in this sense that, you know, if it's the case that the vast majority of time or frequently clients are slow and you're running behind schedule, that becomes an issue for the state regulators. That's my question.
Chris, go ahead.
So I always bill in arrears in order to mitigate some of that risk. And if it turns out that these services rendered have run too far in the past and I'm at risk of not collecting for over 6 months, then there'll be an additional poke at that point in order to ensure that I don't run afoul of the 6-month rule. But I billing in arrears will help with a lot of that issue.
Thank you.
Okay, 5 more seconds. Yes, Chris, another question.
Yeah, I had a question for the tax experts on here. At what point do we as planners run the risk of overstepping the bounds of advice into tax advice, from financial advice to tax advice? For example, I think asset location is certainly something that we can opine on with respect to what securities are most tax efficient and what counts. But if we were to go and recommend that they create an S Corp or LLC for some reason, that might be off limits. So how do you know when you have overstepped your bounds on a tax basis?
I'm not a lawyer, so, you know, but I guess I would just say, like, that's probably gonna be different for each person. Like, I'm gonna be a lot more comfortable giving tax advice than somebody else on particular subjects. There's plenty of stuff where I'm like, I'm out. So I would just say, if you're starting to get into that, a good spot is to start educating yourself and either in the resources or reach out to somebody else and just say, here's some things I think you might need to think about, and you're gonna need to talk with somebody to do that. No different than if you're doing insurance or something. Hey, I think you might need some life insurance and maybe this is how much you need, but like, I'm not gonna sell you the product. So.
But you're a CPA as well, Dwight. So you kind of have credentials to be able to opine on that. Like, as an example, if I have a client who has a SEP IRA, but I recommend that they roll that into a solo 401k instead in order to be able to make Roth contributions, that seems like it would be financial planning advice so that they can put Roth money away. However, as a solopreneur, that is also her business. So I'm opining on the tax strategy of her and her business. So is that over the line?
I don't know if it's over the line. That's why I just think tax planning is financial planning, or vice versa. It's just like that Venn diagram is so much. There's so much overlap. I think if you're not entirely sure, I think you're totally fine with punting, especially if they're working with a tax pro, to say, hey, look, like, here's what I'm thinking, but like, let's loop in your tax pro on this and get their take on it. Maybe I'm missing something.
And they should go to the meeting with that person.
Yep.
Always, right.
Yeah, I'm just, because personally, like, as the person that like sometimes gets that stuff from financial, hey, I think you should elect an S corporation, and then I got to go explain like why you probably shouldn't, and they just said, well, you're going to save all this money, and now I got to be the bad guy. I hate that. It's like, don't do that to me.
Yeah, so what I do for clients is, because I have education in tax law, I wouldn't say I'm a tax law expert or an attorney, but what I do is I research the tax code ahead of time. I print it out for the clients. I highlight where the information that they need to know. And then if they're already working with the CPA, or refer them to a CPA, say, this is what I suggest based on the knowledge that I gathered. And then they can follow up with whoever they prefer.
You got to be careful. They know Dwight's meter is on, mine isn't. So sometimes they put all the tax questions on you because they know you're going to come up with the answer. And you got to be careful not to go too far and cross those lines. And anyway, so just a subtlety. The clients are pretty smart about what's going to cost and what isn't. So you got to be cognizant.
I think that was Danielle that was saying she highlights sections in the code and makes recommendations based on what she reads in the code. Would somebody who does not have tax credentials open themselves up to liability doing that?
Maybe, but that'd be a question for probably more compliance. I'd go the other way, right? So I also see people going out and getting their enrolled agent designation. And so now I'd say, now you're giving tax advice. So you just told that person they should elect S corporation as a tax professional. So you have Circular 230 that you're now part of. Are you sure you really did your due diligence that that's a good idea? So I'm not saying anybody on this call shouldn't go do that, because it's a great way to learn. But I would just say, now you're putting yourself on the hook for things that maybe you didn't want to, because you're holding yourself out there to be a tax expert in some regard.
Yeah, I agree with Dwight. Personally, I'm not a tax expert, but what I do is that if I got a tax issue or with whatever client I have, I go to a tax expert, either a tax lawyer or an accountant. That's in my experience.
Thanks, everyone.
I want to get to the legal update, but I don't want to take anybody off. So are there any last questions before we move into the legal realm? An update from Canute. Tell me the answer, people. Okay, we're going to the legal section. Go ahead, Canute.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. Just first, full disclosure, this is a legal update, but just so there's no uncertainty, I am not an attorney. I've never gone to law school. So, but I work every single day with attorneys in the work that we do at the Institute. So just, I want to bear that in mind.
So what is what is the Institute? Can you just say what the Institute is?
The Institute for the Fiduciary Standard is a not-for-profit think tank that has existed for 11 years for the sole purpose of advancing fiduciary duties, principles, and practices in investment advice and financial planning. So that is what we do. So we are dealing with the SEC, we're dealing with DOL. We have members who are fee-only fiduciary planners, such as virtually everybody on this call. And that's our reason to exist. So over the last month or two, Sarah and I have been meeting informally with a small number of the advisors here. Adam, Dwight, Cody, and Scott have been in our informal group. If you are interested in finding out if you want to join this informal group going forward, please let Sarah or I know. We've been meeting because I guess it started with the state of Colorado coming out with a memorandum regarding the issue of AUM versus hourly versus fixed flat fee. It came out in March, and with some opinions that got a lot of or some advisors upset. Michael Kitces weighed in, CFP board weighed in, FPA weighed in, and we weighed in October, and that the Institute actually met with the commissioner in Colorado to get a better idea of what her concerns were and the department's concerns. And then to bring it up to now, the Colorado came out with a revised opinion about their views regarding fixed fee, flat fee, hourly fees.
Can you just like what the issue is roughly? Like it's that they're unclear about what the planners are doing to command the fees that
the issue I think has to do with clarity around the fees that are being charged by planners and the services that are being delivered. Michael Kitces went on for 11 pages to basically say that AUM advisors were being unfairly treated by, flat fee, fixed fee, hourly fee advisors were being unfairly treated by Colorado in how they were approaching, how they were examining planners. And I think that is the gist of the issue. I got into it, just to be clear, the Institute is not taking a position on one business model versus a fee model versus another. We got into it because of the what we saw as happening in this community of in terms of transparency, clarity, and simplicity in the communication of fees and services. And that's the piece of it that is of interest to us as it relates to our fiduciary mission. So that is the big issue that that has some advisors upset. When Colorado came out in mid-November and clarified their points, in my view, most of their edits were literally clarifications on what they meant. And I don't think there was major changes in it, but I think that there is a core issue there at the nub that does need further refinement, and that I think would benefit from a group of advisors from this group to sort of formally express our views to Colorado and to other states. And that does get to what exactly is necessary in the regulator's point of view in terms of reporting, in terms of services delivered for the fees charged. And then at the same time, to put a ribbon around this, the State Association of Securities Administrators came out 2 weeks ago with a paper that basically said their interest is to be able to make a determination that the fees being charged are reasonable, period, end of sentence. So that's the general view of the issue at hand, and I think there is. I am optimistic that the material differences either are not there, frankly, looking at what Colorado is saying, or they can be fairly well addressed. Because my sense is that the state regulators, because they're not the feds, they have a far better understanding of what the people on this call are in terms of fee-only fiduciary advisors, as opposed to everybody else they deal with out there that cannot be as transparent and clear and simple just because of how they're structured. So the situation right now is that I have formally requested a meeting with the state officials, which they said we could do, and have not gotten a reply yet, to be able to drill down on a number of these points that are still need to be further refined. So that's it in a nutshell. Any questions? Any comments? I guess not. Thank you, Sarah.
You're welcome. Yeah, this is something that, I anticipate will be ongoing as the popularity of flats and advice-only models continues to grow. We view it as an educational process where we are essentially the conduit between the planning community, the advisors, and the regulators to align everybody's understanding for the benefit of society. Hello, Chris Randall.
Hey, Canute, thanks for the update. It's my personal opinion that change usually occurs the fastest when there is demand from the consumer for that change. Are you seeing people in Colorado gravitating towards flat fee and fee for service kind of models in order to push the regulators more quickly, or is it mostly just trying to push the regulators to see that their viewpoint is kind of short-sighted?
Well, I would never suggest to a regulator that their viewpoint is short-sighted, but it is. I think from our part, I think there are good faith misunderstandings, and I underscore good faith because of the benefit of the doubt I give the regulators here, and I think that that much can be accomplished by addressing those good faith misunderstandings. Now, in terms of what's happening in Colorado specifically, I will throw that to Dwight to see whether he has anything more to add, because he's closer to it, both geographically and literally. But the issue of the consumer demand from the regulator's point of view has not come up except indirectly. I think you can look at their last letter of November and see there is a reference or two to it that this is what is driving the flat fee, hourly fee, in some cases, movement. But I don't see that as being a major issue. But Dwight, you want to jump in here offer a comment or two?
Yeah, Chris. Just I got 1 minute. Chris, yeah, there's plenty of people that want to do flat fee or something like that here in the state of Colorado. And, I agree that the state's got good questions on that. But if you, for example, go through like the XYPN, like private forums, if you're part of that, you can kind of find and see like what people are dealing with in terms of their deficiency letters and things like that. And so we're not maybe as bad as like the state of Washington, but I will just kind of say anecdotally, yes, there are people that are maybe getting away from that and either doing an upfront plan for an X fee, and then unfortunately either ongoing either needs to be hourly or AUM, because it's just unfortunately not. There's plenty of people that are just like, I'm one person, I'm not really going to be the martyr and fight the state, so I'm just going to just do it. So it's not great. But there are people out here that like the demand is here from consumers. There's a lot of consumers that want it, which is the whole point of the Kitsis letter.
At the end of the day, isn't it truly about proving and illustrating the deliverables that you're providing for the fee that you're charging? And if you have solid, justifiable records for that, would the auditors and the state people not be okay with that?
No, I think that is the core point at the end of the day, and on that point, I think if you were to ask at least Colorado what their perfect world would be, it would turn everybody into an hourly advisor, and everybody keep track of every 15 minutes they spend every month and invoice there. Our approach thus far has been that's not really in the consumer's best interest because of the impact requiring that would have on the marketplace. But short of that, and to be able on for example, a quarterly basis to show the regulators and to show Mr. and Mrs. Smith, this is what I did for you. And we're not talking about a 10-page report. We're talking about a half page of bullet points. This last quarter, this is what we did. Bing, 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 bing. And in that, I think there is a legitimate distinction between deliverables and that can be related to value add as opposed to inputs. And my sense is that, this would be easy if we all said, okay, well, let's just all do hourly and we will keep track of every 15-minute segment. I don't think that's where we want to go. I don't think that's where we need to go. But, again, Chris provided, I thought, was a very good example in terms of what a half a page of bullet points looks like in terms of getting that point across. Chris?
Yeah, so I've seen more and more of these financial coaches popping up on social media, and they're sending out newsletters, typically charging $70 to $100 a month for information. Is this a concern that has come up in Colorado? Is this the counterexample? Like, hey, look at what these people are doing. They're not licensed. They're giving advice and they're charging a flat fee, and therefore we don't like it. Has this particular example entered the conversation at all? Just curious personally, because I've seen more and more of this.
Yep. So like in 2019 or 20, I was at a state thing that Colorado put on, and people brought this up more specifically to like insurance agents and things like that. And just kind of saying, hey, look, like, you're regulating us as RIAs and we're here trying to do the right thing. And there's people putting up billboards making ridiculous claims. Why can't you go after them? And their response was, well, they're not under our jurisdiction. And so sort of the point is that most of the work that they're doing, the examination work, are for already registered, licensed RIAs or advisors like we all are, presumably, and not so much for these people on the fringe side of that. So it's sort of like, well, if you're going to just be criminal, you just don't get licensed, and then you're not going to get caught anyway. And so now what? So yeah, I mean, I kind of had the same argument or discussion with the regulator when I got registered and said, look, I have an exemption as an accountant, as a CPA under the SEC. And last I checked, most financial planning is tax planning. So why don't I just say a CPA licensed firm and just not manage assets? And he said, okay. So yes, it seems kind of counterproductive, but basically if somebody's going to be criminal, they're not necessarily going after, it's not that they're not necessarily going after them. It's just that like, they're not coming up on their, hey, haven't been audited in 2 or 3 years or whatever, right? Like they're not examining non-registered people. So yeah, I don't know. How do you prove a negative?
But you can report them.
You could, right? You certainly could. And I know that one of the things they kind of mentioned too, and I'm not saying that they're not going to investigate it, but one of the things they did point out was if somebody, realizes a loss from investment advice or something, they're going to want to go back and figure out, well, how much is gone? Because if somebody lost 100% because of fraud, they're not going to be so inclined to do that because there's nothing to get. So like, it's just a matter of like, what rabbit hole do they want to go down, being probably understaffed and all of that. So yeah, you could certainly report it, but then it's just going to depend on like, is it their jurisdiction? Because the insurance thing went on for probably 15 or 20 minutes where they finally said, okay, we'll look into it. It's like, walk down the hall, like it's in the same building, like walk down the hall, you have coffee with these people, come on. So anyway, for anybody from the state of Colorado, if you're watching this, like, I love you guys. So
Yeah, are there any other Colorado advisors here on the call? Skip. So what's your take on all this, Skip?
Well, I'm part of an RIA that's SEC registered, so it hasn't come up here locally. And Dwight and I have talked about this before, but I will tell you the demand for hourly only advice is growing here. People are actually seeking it out. So what I've done personally is the clients that I had subscription contracts with, we've changed them over to just hourly. So I don't charge them on a quarterly or monthly basis anymore. So it's so that even if the state, which even though I'm SEC registered, they can come and look at our records through our RIA, but so that we want to be sure that we're not even getting close to the line. So I've done away with the subscription clients.
Same, by the way.
The only thing that
initial project and then anything ongoing is either AUM or hourly. So yeah, very, very.
The only thing that I'd add to this, I was speaking to somebody that I know the other day, and kind of in our smaller group, Knut and Dwight, is that, at the end of the day, we were talking about this being an issue maybe in certain states. Well, interestingly enough, this person I was speaking with, they're not registered in one of the kind of common states, Washington and Colorado, and some of the states where this issue was. And they said that they ran into a couple issues with a regulator of their state, and they were state registered advisor, and they do not manage money. They don't charge AUM fees. And I asked what the issues were that they were running into. And it kind of comes back to that same issue of, what are you doing for the fees that you're charging, whether, again, they're retainer, subscription, hourly. They didn't really care about that. They cared about, strangely enough, more of the wordsmithing that we talked about before. Are they saying the right words in their ADV? And this state regulator actually helped the advisor sort of wordsmith their ADV to basically be fine with the regulator's stamp of approval. And they ended up settling on something I don't really agree with, but it's kind of, I guess, the way that the regulator wants to see it, which is this advisor has an ongoing relationship with clients where they pay them more of a, I don't want to say kind of a fixed quarterly or monthly fee. I'm not sure what frequency they charge that, but it's a fixed fee, more like a retainer subscription. They said basically call it an investment monitoring fee because you are monitoring investments. So I think part of the problem still comes back around to the AUM fee being charged, being attributed to the investment side, and they always want to kind of bring the investment angle back into the equation somehow. So as long as they put down your monitoring investments in there with whatever the heck else you're doing, we're fine with that language now.
I think that is a key point in terms of being reminded of where they're coming from in terms of what their training is and what their experience is. And it's not with helping select the insurance coverage that a client needs, and it's and it's not doing taxes per se, I'm guessing. So they go back to what they know and what they understand, and when they walk in there, and they have at least a mental list of the things they've got to look for in terms of the investments, where they don't have that same list for all the other financial planning things, perhaps. Right. So anyway.
I just thought that was kind of interesting. Like they actually helped them wordsmith. You put the investments in there, we're okay with it.
Yeah.
Okay, y'all. So here we are. We've been on this call for about an hour and 20 minutes. My objective for the next however much time remaining is to gauge what the interests of this group are, and that will help me to be able to customize future meetups and other content to further advance our goal of becoming more transparent and serving the consumer at a higher level than before. Yes, Chris. I feel like I'm a teacher when you do that, when you raise your hand at me.
Sarah, first of all, thank you so much for all the work that you put into this group and this meetup. It's immensely helpful, and you don't get enough credit for everything that you do.
The only thing I ask is I just want the public to experience awesome results from the people in this group and others that we may bring into our community. That really is all that I ask, and I would be so delighted. I love my family, I love my community, I love my country, and I really just want to make a difference, but I can't do it all alone. And I'm so thankful for all of you for putting up with me and tolerating me enough to be here with me on various levels. I know it varies from person to person, some more so than others, but thank you so much. Go ahead, Chris.
So I've been coming to these for a couple of months now, and some of the value from the early meetings was that they were such a much smaller group, and so we got time to actually get to know different kinds of people. I think this is where I met Dwight actually, and Matt, and maybe a couple other people. So perhaps an idea would be to split into smaller breakout rooms where for 20 minutes, each person could just introduce themselves, who they specialize in, or maybe one thing about them, and we can just kind of get a little more personal, and then bring it back to the bigger room for the speakers of that day.
That would require me to have to learn how to create breakout rooms on Zoom. Well, I guess I'll have to do it. All right, well, just not this time, okay, okay, Chris, but yeah, breakout rooms, that's a great suggestion. Also, y'all can like be friends outside of this too. You know, I always try to like make people talk to each other on social media in my group and stuff, but you know, what can I do? I can't force your hand at this. I don't know, should there be like a directory? Should I list people out in a directory? Should I ask about that? I mean, maybe in the next, here's what I'll do. In the next newsletter, I will ask that. I will say, how about a list of contacts with the description of fixed fees versus hourly, et cetera? Okay, so I could just say, I'll ask people, do you want to be included in our transparent advisor movement registry? And if so, what state and how, like one sentence describing your business. And then that way people could say, oh my goodness, I'm from Connecticut, like Carol is at. Carol, I believe, are you the one asking this? Carol, forgive me. Okay, Carol is asking for other Connecticut.
Not from Connecticut, but I have a prospective person who may want to work with somebody locally in Connecticut. And I didn't know who to give her.
Thank you. So you're looking for a Connecticut financial planner?
Who works somewhat like I do on a fixed fee basis, yeah.
Flat fee advisor in Connecticut. So I have a list of flat fee advisors on my website.
Ah.
I could probably find you one there.
Okay, that'd be great.
Okay, Lonta, hi. Okay, yes, I'm gonna send the link in the newsletter subsequent to this meetup that will have the registration information for my, am I even sharing the screen anymore? I don't think I am. Actually, I could put it in this chat. Yeah, I didn't do that. I probably should have done that before. Oh my gosh, where is it even? Okay, let me go ahead and just send that out. I'm going to send it in the chat, the thing about signing up for the marketing session on Monday. Okay, so when everyone's going crazy here on the chat, blah, blah. Okay, Lanta, yes, I'll be happy to have you there, Lanta. Okay, so maybe I'll create a directory of all the people from this community that want to be listed out, and I'll do it by state and by description of what kind of business it is. Okay, good. So that, the breakout rooms, those are two things. Let me write this down. Breakouts, what else? What else can I do here? What did you think of my idea of starting a transparency newsletter? Is that a good idea?
Sarah, I think you need to think bigger. And by that, I mean, think about, is there the basis for a 1/2 day or 1 day sort of quasi conference that is focused exclusively on these issues? And because the content that we can get at the best of the normal conferences are just so much more broader in their reach. So I guess my question is whether there's a void in content that could be covered in a micro conference, virtual, that is more focused on the interests of this group.
I was planning to have a virtual conference in 2023, but I was worried, what if nobody can stand me for a whole day? I mean, I was literally worried about that.
There's Chris.
We already can't stand you, Sarah, so don't worry.
Okay.
I would turn the question back to the participants and say, what is it that you hope to get? You know, what is it that you are struggling with? I know what I'm struggling with and what I am here for, but I think, and I can help you with this, we put together a questionnaire that kind of details some of these things, maybe some categories or some open-ended questions about why are you here and what would you like help with? What can we do? What would you like to get from this community? Because maybe some people aren't as comfortable, you know, saying it out loud, and we can have it anonymous. And then from there, if there's a common theme, like 6 people are all trying to figure out how to get started on social media marketing or whatever, and take it from there.
Okay, so I'll survey the group about what the conference agenda should be. Because I feel like yeah, I mean, that would be especially a time for conferences, because I think people go to conferences to be able to meet other people. So if it's just like a series of webinars, one after the other for 4 hours, I think, hell yeah, people are going to be hating me. Here, let me put myself on the spotlight there now. That's great. There we go. Got to jump. Okay, Kelly, thank you. Great to see you, Kelly. Okay. So here's another question. What should be the topic for the next meetup?
So Sarah, I was intrigued with your efforts to educate kids coming out of college and kind of the, is there a community outreach approach to this where we can have some more hope for the future here, that our industry can actually gravitate towards an industry, towards profession? You know, I'm not sure educating the public in general and these young kids coming out of college they refer to them as dial and smile jobs, you know, where they're asked by an insurance company to come up with here's a list of 200 people of family and soon to be lost friends kind of thing. So education of the public I'm particularly interested in.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So I'm sorry, you were suggesting that as the topic for the next meetup?
Well, is that part of the agenda of the group?
It is. I've mentioned this before. It could be more. Yeah. I mean, I'm going to speak with a group of students this evening, and then I have another college I'm going to be speaking with in 2023. But I could do something more with that. I mean, that would be great. You know, right now, you're right. The default option is go to work at a wirehouse and, right. So I'm interested in doing that. How do I break that? And, I am having ideas spinning in my mind and in the process of creating more centralized information related to that. So creating like a directory for, here's a list of paraplanners, right? Or paraplanner resources, or here's the number, or even like statistics. It seems like no one's collecting information about this. Here's the number of paraplanners in the United States. Here's what their salaries are. There's not a lot of data and information about that, right? It's a big nebulous cloud. So, I am thinking about all of these things. And especially whereas I love college students and think that they're so cute, I think it would be really fun to do that. I used to be a college professor. I was very unconventional. The first day I would tell them, okay, there's the textbook. Don't worry, we're not going to follow it. I said, you're going to work as hard as you ever work in your entire life. There's the door. But if you want to stay, believe me, you're in for a ride. You're going to learn a heck of a lot. It was great. The reviews were off the charts. They loved me. They were so cute. You know, they used to give me the 9 a.m. on Saturday. When you're a new professor, they give you like the worst. It was like Wednesday. I literally got the Wednesday from 6 to 9 p.m. teach derivatives. And then Saturday, 9 a.m. teach intro to finance. Saturday, 9 a.m. to college students. Who does that? Who schedules it? It was the City University of New York. Building out a service calendar is a topic I'm interested in. What does that mean, Chris Randall, building out a service calendar?
So a lot of times there may be gaps between certain parts of the year where you've already done your tax planning, you've already done your rebalancing, and it's not quite like fall, so you're not doing the benefits review yet, but there's other value that you can add throughout the year. So I'm putting together a service calendar for my prospects and clients that says, hey, here are some other things we're going to tackle throughout the year so that they don't fall to the wayside. Insurance review being an example, going through the insurance deck pages and making sure they have appropriate coverage, they're not overpaying, etc. So I'm curious as to anyone else has a similar kind of service calendar, what's on it, how they approach it. if something comes up that is high priority and you have to kick something that's on the calendar down the road, how you handle that, etc.
Okay, I'll put that on the agenda. Yeah, maybe that should be it. Maybe that should be the topic for the next meetup, is what do you do every month of the year?
If people get tired of you, should I just run the meeting, Sarah? I'm just kidding. There's no way I can
Okay,
Hey, Sarah.
yeah, who is it?
I just as back one topic, but I've seen you mention that before about, trying to stem the tide of people flowing into wirehouses and getting that type of job. And we just mentioned it. Is there a way, obviously they make it very easy, right? In mass numbers, they provide resources, they provide assistance, they provide desks, offices in mass numbers. Is there any talk of a way to begin to move that flow into the independent financial planning world, where each of us kind of sits in these 2-person offices and doesn't have a lot of money to bring them on board? So like, what's the
Well, okay, so
one
one of the models that would work maybe is that, because I've interviewed different para planners, is that one guy said that after college, he didn't want to go work for a wirehouse. So he just started like an independent consulting firm where he, okay, so Eric, thank you. So, where he like went around and made phone calls to different RA firms and was like, hey, I can do your para planning work as a 1099. And he's basically started up a business that way doing that. There is Michelle Wong. Michelle, are you here?
How does this part of the industry bring people into it en masse? In order to shift the balance of the way things are done.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think, well, to the extent that flat fee or hourly firms, have the financial capacity to support this kind of a person, then they would just bring them on, either virtually, like sharing resources, having them work part-time, getting a para planner through an agency. Like Michelle Wong that was on this call runs Nifty Advisors, and Nifty Advisors is essentially a recruiting firm that parses out para planners and different support personnel to our, companies like this. Yeah, I mean, it's like the business model would be, it's not like there's a gazillion dollar deep pockets like AXA Insurance, right? Where you could just take up a bunch of people, train them, fire them, etc.
Right.
So, I mean, I don't know if, just very candidly, the solution would be within the flat fee advisor realm inherently, because it wouldn't seem natural, right? The economics are what they are, and it would not seem natural. However, how many RIA firms are there out there? That would, I think, be the more logical way to proceed. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, probably getting firms, and also you could get existing firms to change their compensation model, right? And that would automatically move X number of people.
Yep.
Into
Dwight,
the new way of doing things.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah, no, there's no easy answer. There's no solution. It's just kind of like, that's a big ship to steer across the industry for sure.
I know, but that's why it's worth steering, because no one else is going to steer it. So
That's
probably
right.
someone who's a total lunatic that just doesn't even care would be a good person for that. So I think that is the answer. Good. No, I like it. I mean, I wish I could just, have clarity to have I mean, the question would be for time, but I'm not going to make that excuse. I'm devoted to my country. So that's what I'm going to do to help the country. Dwight.
I'm biased because I'm an accountant and I came up through an accounting world, and I came up through an accounting firm that we focused on high net worth clients, multi-generational businesses, mostly in the middle market. So like I wasn't out there like doing 500 tax returns or anything like that. But I think like AICPA is pushing further into that like it's coming together much more. And so I'm not saying somebody like a student should necessarily go out and get their CPA license, because that's like a whole fight on that side as well. But if the idea is to come in there and like learn some of this stuff that isn't just dialing for dollars, the trade-off is that, yeah, you're going to, especially if you're in the tax department, like you're going to work a bunch of hours like banging out tax returns, but that's how you learn the tax code of like, you get a review note, go look it up, go look at this court case, figure this thing out. And you do that 30 times and you start to really understand like how this stuff works. And so maybe you're not an expert in like the insurance or some of these other pieces, but there are plenty of CPA firms that have a financial planning arm that if you're really mostly pretty good in the tax side and have kind of that consulting or the financial planning client facing type of ability, like you kind of get groomed to go into that side of the world as well. So, I mean, I'm not here, like I've got a lot of issues with the AICPA as well, but like that might be more of it to try to find that technical knowledge of how do I do all this stuff rather than just going to a wirehouse or insurance company and dial for dollars. That was sort of my track of why I didn't go into like financial planning right from the get-go, even though I have a finance degree. So
Right. Well, it would have been
it's
great.
a different animal.
Yeah, I mean, the CFP board is preoccupied with the insurance industry and being an ally to them. So we can't rely on the CFP designation to be the conduit for this. So it has to be me, Sarah Grillo.
Sarah, one of the things that I ran into over the years, and I think this is part of the challenge, is that why everybody sort of ends up in the wirehouses and the insurance companies dialing for dollars is because even like RIA firms, even if regardless of the fee model and all that, I mean, just the independent RIA space, even larger RIAs that are, 20, 30, people working there, a mixture of advisors, administrative, operational folks, and so on, they don't have the infrastructure to provide that type of training and kind of grooming of a person or people in that capacity. And I think that's where the default, they just end up at those spots in the wirehouses. And then they got to kind of get that knowledge that that's not the right thing. And they kind of go back the other way and decide that they're going to go into the independent space in some way or another.
Yeah, so maybe that's the topic of is how to train a paraplanner. Did I interpret what you said correctly?
No, you got it. I mean, I think part of it's like resources, money wise, the firm has to dedicate, money to doing that, just to compensate the person or people, but also the training side of it is, I think, the bigger side of it because there's no infrastructure. I mean, I'm just going from some personal experience at a prior firm that I was a partner in. And when we first started, we had kind of some local colleges that were trying to get kind of CFP programs off the ground. And they said, oh, can you bring some interns in once in a while and do that? And we said, oh, sure. We want to, set people on the right way to do things. But then they would show up and it's like, okay, well, go sit with, Bob or Susie or Jane or whatever for the day. And there's no real formal training in place. So we thought we were doing the right thing by bringing these folks in. This was an intern, not like, again, a formal training program for a paraplanner or something. But, it ended up being where I think it was costing us money and our time in that trying to find things for this person to learn when we weren't really equipped to provide that service. And I think that's unfortunately where a lot of firms are, even if they're very large firms, they haven't really thought about that. They just, think these people can be pulled out of somewhere else and brought in and they can kind of train them on their systems and then they're off to the races.
Northeastern's co-op program has a nice solution to that. If you're familiar with it, they'll do 6-month stints and it's a full dedicated job for 6 months. And there's no sidetracks here. And they're trained by their predecessor, whoever was in there. And they very often get jobs later and it's real training. But that's a real dilemma. In our office, we have interns in the summer and they're definitely a net cost, even though we don't necessarily pay them. We give them a bonus at the end of the summer, but it's a net cost to the firm.
What if somebody,
because of the opportunity.
Okay. What if somebody came up with a training program for paraplanners?
Why not? Why not duplicate you, Sarah? So you're doing this in New York. I'll raise my hand for Massachusetts. If we kind of put together some sort of a training program, hit the colleges, et cetera, get things started, and maybe we start to move the needle a little bit.
I would do that. I actually would. Okay. Provided, I mean, I have 4 kids and I have a business and everything, but if it were the status quo as it is, I would somehow, I'm up late, I go to bed at late, but I would go to bed a little later if I could do that, because that really would change the world. That would. I mean, there's no doubt about it, that would. Okay,
Because I think if there was a program and a formal guidance for training, even some independent RIAs, even if they're not larger, even the smaller side, could take that training program and actually use it within their firm. But right now, they don't have that, and they're not going to create it. And even if they were inclined to do that, how are they going to create a program? And then again, the next firm is doing it differently. So there's no standard then sort of at that point. Not that, there's got to be one standard, but at least one level of guidance on different topics and learnings and ways to approach it. So that would be good, I think, for a lot of RIA independent firms, regardless of size, if they're inclined to want to kind of groom the next generation and train people, is to have some more of a formal way of doing it. Because I mean, I think a lot of firms sort of just default once in a while to, unfortunately, the CFP. Oh, go study for your CFP, and that'll get you the training you need, and work here in the meantime. And that doesn't really do anything for people.
heck yeah, agree with you. All right, I have to end this meetup now. Does anybody object? All right.
What, second round of the discussion? We do Robert's Rules of Order on this? Like, it's your meeting.
I know, but this is the democracy. You know what I mean? Okay. All right. So I'm ending the meeting. This is what we're going to do. We're going to meet in January. I think the topic in January should be the financial planning yearly calendar, which we'll be doing month by month, right? Okay. And then there's a ton of free resources. I'm having a sales and marketing workshop for an hour and a half on Monday. We're having our engagement day tomorrow at 1 p.m. Everybody, avail yourself of these free resources, and thank you so much for being here. Bye, everybody.
Thank you, Sarah.